Welcome to Ice Cream You Scream, your weekly scoop of the most chilling histories, mysteries, and true crime. My name is Kathryn.
I'm Gina.
Every month we choose a new topic and new ice cream flavor to go along with it. So this month's flavor to be discussed is phroggers, aka people living in your home without your knowledge. Super duper hate it, but we'll get into that later. And ice cream flavor that we will be enjoying while we discuss our topic is Phish food from Ben & Jerry's. Hashtag not sponsored, but wannabe. Quick reminder to like and subscribe, rate and review. But in the meantime, grab a spoon and let's dig in.
I actually have something to tell you.
Do it.
You know how I told you I was going to make apple cider donuts?
Oh my god, yeah.
So I did, but I put them in a muffin tin and made apple cider donut muffins. And they're fucking incredible, man. I need to send you the recipe. They are so, and then you don't feel as bad because it's a muffin. So you're like, oh, I can have 2 of these.
Or 7, or the whole tray. So it's not in, this might be a stupid question, but it's like no special shape, literally just muffin shaped. Because before you said they were muffins, I was imagining you like rolling it into the donut shape and putting it in a muffin tin. And I was like, how did that work? Although I guess it could work somehow. I don't know.
I'm not going to try. It's a very wet
I was going to say, someone out there, if you've ever made a apple cider donut shaped donut in a muffin tin, email us at icecreamyscreampod@gmail.com.
Tell us how the hell you did it. What is your magic?
I will say, I do like this ice cream. Yeah. We did not give it a number rating last time. We can do that at the end of this episode. But I know we talked about how surprising it was that both of us liked this due to the fact that it's full of stuff that neither of us really like. But I like it. I'm enjoying this ice cream.
It's so good. Ben & Jerry's, I feel like you can hand me any flavor, right? Mm-hmm. Any flavor, and I'll be happy with it. Especially, have you had their sundae ones?
No.
Oh, dude. Okay. They're so good. They're like, picture like a normal Ben & Jerry's like pint of ice cream. But on top, it has like this whipped creamy kind of soft serve ice cream stuff. And then they sprinkle it with like delicious bits of goodness. It's so good. You should try some if you get a chance.
That does sound good. I'm trying to think of what my favorite one. It's not new anymore, but I remember when it first came out. I think it was the one that Jimmy Fallon did.
Oh.
It's very
Is that the Tonight Cone?
Dough.
Or
the Tonight Dough, I think is what it's called. Because it's when he first got on the Tonight Show. It was like their promotional one, but it still exists. We need to do that one.
I've had that one before. It's good.
At some point. I love that one. I love cookies. A plain old traditional chocolate chip cookie is my favorite thing.
Wait, are you a mint chocolate chip person? I can't remember.
No. I'm not like...
yeah.
It's not like repulsive to me. I do get the appeal, but it is not for me personally. That's my diplomatic answer.
Okay. If anyone listening to this is a fan of mint chocolate chip, Ben & Jerry's do this like mint chocolate chip ice cream, but it has chunks of Oreos in it. And Oreo ice cream is like top tier for me. And mint chocolate chip is
love
too.
Mint, yeah. I almost said I love mint. I just said that I didn't. I meant to say I do love that's why I always used to get at Dairy Queen when I was little. I would order an Oreo Blizzard with extra Oreo.
I would get a Snickers Blizzard with extra Snickers.
I knew that about you. I think we went to Culver's or something at some point together.
I think we did.
Do people know what Culver's is?
No.
Is that
a lot of people? Well, yeah. I shouldn't say everyone doesn't. A lot of people don't.
Yeah, certainly not over there, I imagine, right? It's not an international thing. Yeah.
Not really.
It's specific to, well, I shouldn't say specific to Wisconsin, but it's headquartered in Wisconsin. What should I compare it to? I don't want to be disrespectful.
I think it falls somewhere in between like a McDonald's and a Shake Shack.
Okay, yes, that's better than my range that I was giving it. That's why I was stuck. Yeah, yeah. So I was going to say something that I took a big old bite. Speaking of rating and reviewing, which we were not really speaking of, but I mentioned it earlier, and I was going to transition then, but it just didn't fit vocally, so I just kept talking about something else. We got a lovely review that I love.
We did.
And would love to share. We've gotten a few reviews thus far, and we very, very much appreciate them. If you are someone who has left a review or rating for us, we really appreciate it. We know it takes time and effort to say things, but I'm like really enjoying myself reading these reviews. The one that I want to feature is by someone we don't know who it is. The other ones we either know or can guess. This one I have no clue. So I'm going to read you guys a review, and if it was you, please let us know because it was just such a nice review and we love it so much. Okay. The title is Lovely Voices. Off to a great start. Love it so much. It says, I had to tune in to see what this was all about. While this one particular topic in episode 1 was not for me, I look forward to seeing what's next. Both hosts have clear, kind, and enjoyable voices. Highly recommend.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you. Nice. I love that they straight up say, like, I didn't like this topic, but they were so nice about it. I love that they were like, it's episode 1. This is not for me, but I'm going to give it a chance. That is from EG_47. If you know us or you're following along with us, please let us know who you are so we can thank you. I just love that review.
So this is kind of an aside, but I thought you were about to say EJ, and I was going to flip my lid because that's the initials of like the person I'm talking about today. So like, oh my God, maybe it was him.
Wait. That's
interesting. He's super dead. He's very dead, but
maybe not. Maybe he's on Apple. Maybe he's on Apple Podcasts now. Maybe
I would love to get haunted by his ghost. His spirit is welcome to visit me any fucking time.
Tell me more. Is this us transitioning into our episode for the day?
I think it might be. Let me have one more bite of ice cream.
Excellent. Okay.
To prepare myself.
I was going to say me too, but I'm just going to keep eating while you chat.
I seriously, the way this story makes me feel, I feel like I'm about to sit down to have like a gossip sesh with you at a bar or something.
Love that. It's my favorite thing.
It's one of those where either I'm fucking insane or this is the most incredible story I've ever heard in my entire life. And I don't know which one it is, so I need you to tell me.
Maybe both. Okay. We'll see.
So this is a truly wild story of shenanigans, hoopla, and general skullduggery. Today, we're going to be talking about... I know, seriously, could you pick a more Gina story? So we're going to be talking about a series of very high-profile break-ins and phrogging incidents that led to the British government basically or effectively declaring war on a teenage boy.
What?
Yeah, it is a 100% true story, but the way that it happens, the beats of it are like a comedy movie. Don't get me wrong, there are some things that happen in this story that are not okay. People do break the law. There is some light kidnapping that goes on, but...
Sorry. Light, just a little gentle, just a teeny little nap. Just a little,
it's
like
government
a diet
sanctioned.
Kidnap.
Like a diet kidnap, yeah.
Oh, good.
But anyway, okay. So I'm just going to start at the beginning.
Excellent.
So Edward Jones was born on the 7th of April, 1824. He was an Aries, another Aries.
Oh my God, I was literally thinking that. Yeah.
There's been a lot of them. And he was born to Henry Jones and his wife, Mary. Mary, his mom, was around 16 when the couple married back in 1822, which made her around 18 by the time Edward was born. It's not clear exactly how old Henry, the dad, was, but we know that he was like substantially older than Mary. This was the 1800s, so he was probably like in his 40s by the time that Edward was born. So kind of a gross age gap there, but I digress. Edward was the eldest of what would eventually become 7 kids, and they did not come from a well-off background like at all. And the high number of kids really did not help this. His dad did have a job. He was a tailor. He like had his own shop, but he was way more interested in like drinking and fucking around than he was working. And his mom was a seamstress who worked for his dad. So like together, they just didn't really pull in a whole ton of money. So they lived in London, and they lived in like just one single room for all of them, 7 kids, 2 parents, one room.
Oh boy.
And it was like a damp, dirty kind of place right behind a tavern. So kind of like seedy, blah. So when Edward was growing up, he did not have a great relationship with his family. Like his relationship with his dad in particular was super, super strained. I think it's kind of like eldest boy syndrome a little bit. His dad would later describe Edward as lazy, pessimistic, melancholic, and he would say that Edward treated his siblings with open contempt.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
The reliability of this is like, not really sure about it because his dad was not a great guy anyway. But historians generally agree that Edward was like definitely weird and also really pretentious. When he was growing up into his teen years, he was really fixated on like the finer things in life. And an example of this, the part one of the million things I find funny about this story is that when his mother would serve them tea, you would use like a little tea tray with a pot and cups on it and a little sugar bowl or whatever if they had sugar. And when she would set it down, he wouldn't let anyone else touch it until he had arranged the tray just so, so that it was absolutely perfect. And he would make comments all the time about their home not being like good enough for him. He had these like big aspirations. He wanted to be rich. He thought he deserved it, all this stuff, which I think is part of what created the friction in his family because they were like, dude, we're trying our best and you're being kind of a prick about it.
We're literally just a poor ass family. Like,
yeah, like calm down.
Move on.
But despite the fact that he thought he deserved like a higher quality of life and he wanted, the finer things, he was absolutely fucking disgusting. Like he never ever washed himself, like ever. And he's always described as just looking like just gross and dirty. There's a common misconception about this kid that he was a chimney sweep. He wasn't, but there's a misconception that he was, in part because of his appearance, because chimney sweeps would get dirty from the soot of fireplaces, So there's more reasons why they thought he was a chimney sweep. I'll come back to that later. But anyway, he left school just before he turned 12. So he was literate. He could read. And apparently he was like good at math. That's something that they said about him. And at this point in his life, he wanted to become an architect. And so and this is more of a kid thing than a funny thing, but it is funny to picture. He would like build these crappy little houses out of cardboard. Like, how kids do? Like he would just
like a fort?
Yeah, he would build like cardboard like houses and stuff and like try, but they weren't very good and like just kind of shitty. That they come back later in the story a little bit. It just makes me laugh. So around the time that he left school, this was a time when child labor was a really big thing. And so he started a series of apprenticeships and he did his apprenticeships for about 2 years. And over that time, he would apprentice with a pharmacist, a carver, and a builder named Thomas Griffiths. And Thomas Griffiths will come back later. But basically, every time Edward got an apprenticeship, he wound up getting fired every single time. He could not hold down a job. His employers didn't like hate him or anything. They agreed he was like a fine kid, but they described him as literally just being too mischievous to hold down a job. Just they would get sick of him fucking around and pulling pranks and things like that, so they would fire him. So by the time that Edward is 14, he had lost his last apprenticeship around 1838. And just to zoom out a little bit, in England at this time, they had just crowned a new queen, Queen Victoria. And at the time, she was 19 years old. And people were really, really into her. The two monarchs before her they hadn't been like super popular. They were seen as kind of corrupt and just not great. Whereas she was kind of this young, beautiful, innocent, like basically a chance to create a new world with the guidance of this amazing, incredible Victoria, blah, blah, blah. And she also, in part because she was so young, she became the object of desire for many, many men. Guys were obsessed with her. When I was reading about it, it kind of sounded like the Megan Fox craze of the early 2000s when she was just everywhere. It was like that. And even though like Queen Victoria herself, let me preface this, I'm not calling her ugly or anything, but all of the portraits they would put of her in the press really played up how beautiful, like really, really, like kind of the Facetune of the 1800s kind of thing.
Oh,
they loved her.
That's funny. I know that's true. Well, I shouldn't say I know that's true, but like I know people said that about Cleopatra too, that she was like still stunning for her time. But the images we see now of her, where she's like this hottie with a body, does not accurately depict what she actually looked like.
Yeah. Kind of same thing with Queen Victoria. So England's going nuts over this new queen, right? But on the flip side of that, societally, this was a pretty difficult time. This was when workhouses and child labor were very common. And within the last kind of year, there had been a lot of really gruesome murders in London. There was a guy who he like decapitated and dismembered his girlfriend, and just like all kinds of gross, nasty shit was happening. Yeah, I know. I want to read more about that. But there had been
this was like, well, we could do a London
part
flavor.
2. Yeah. There had been like rioting, social unrest. It just was not a super great time. And remember that Edward didn't really come from a well-off family. So you can only imagine that like his low status intersected with the skyrocketing popularity of Queen Victoria and kind of made him gaze up a little bit. And he wound up just becoming obsessed with Queen Victoria. He would talk about her all the time, to the great annoyance of his family, who wanted him to fucking stop, but he wouldn't. He just could not stop talking about her. So eventually his dad got so frustrated with Edward, for one, because he's annoying, and two, he can't hold down a job, so he's not contributing to the family. So his dad just threw him out of the house one day. And Edward is like, all right, well, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have any money. I'm going to go to Buckingham Palace.
Oh, well, okay. There you go.
So Edward broke into Buckingham Palace for the first time when he was 14 in December of 1838.
Whoa, he was 14? I'm like, I don't know why 14. I'm imagining like a grown-ass man. I guess that doesn't make sense based on what you were saying. Yeah. What? I also did not like, okay, I know the story, you already mentioned what the story was about, but when you said go to Buckingham Palace, I thought I was imagining like a tourist like wandering up and like, you know how people like go up to the guards or whatever?
Yeah.
That's what I was imagining. I don't know why my brain, like I did not compute that this child is like breaking in. What?
Nope, he just broke in.
What a rash decision.
I know. And one thing that's so interesting about this period of British history is, so, I mean, the UK government has always been really kind of convoluted and a little bit archaic in its ways because it's been around for so long. There's a ton of laws and procedures that just over time, it's just gotten really blah, blah, blah. And one of the results of that was that there was not one person who was responsible for security at Buckingham Palace. It was a responsibility that was shared between a ton of different, like, basically departments. And a lot of those departments, like, they would bring in staff who were either incredibly elderly or people who just like didn't really give a shit because they weren't getting paid much money. So despite that this was Buckingham fucking Palace, the security was shit. So anyway,
wild.
Edward manages to sneak in. We think he got in just by slipping through one of the entrances. Some people thought that he got in by climbing down a chimney. More on that later. And once he was in there, he just started messing around. Like he did exactly the things that you would think a 14-year-old boy would do. He strutted around like he owned the place. He checked out like all the cool artifacts they have in there, like weaponry. He was going into people's bedrooms and rummaging through the drawers. Like he made himself right at home. Yeah. So around 5 a.m., one of the night porters was just chilling by one of the entrances. The door to the outside was locked. There was a fire lit in the hearth. And so he was just kind of like cozy. No one's around, just vibing on like a cold winter's night kind of thing. So all of a sudden, one of the doors that leads to, like, it's an interior door, it opens and this porter sees this face looking at him. And it's worth pointing out, Edward was not a good-looking kid. Like, mean to say, but it's in so many of the accounts, and it does kind of heighten the fear that I think the porter felt. So Edward had really over-exaggerated features, very big features. Like his brow bone kind of protruded a lot, and he had like an unsettlingly wide smile.
Oh my God. I know exactly what you're talking about. That is such a what's the word I'm looking for? Like distinct
uncanny valley
quality.
Kind of?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Creepy. So the porter looks like they lock eyes and he sees that this kid, because he doesn't know who he is, this kid is covered in some kind of like black glistening substance. We would later find out that one, he was covered in soot because he had been hiding in a chimney, and he had smeared himself with grease that he found in someone's room.
What?
Yeah.
The fuck?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just like a kid thing. I don't know. Like when I was 6, I found a bottle of Vaseline and rubbed it in my hair, but not when I was 14, you know?
You know when you're a kid and you just go through your grease phase?
I'm
I
still in
actually
my grease
did, but
phase.
yeah, I actually did, but I went through like the musical phase, not physical like oil on my body. That's
Different strokes for
hilarious.
different folks. Different grease for different
Yeah.
peeps, you know?
Wait, good job. New hashtag.
Thank you.
I'm putting that in the social.
But like funniness aside, the porter had to have been fucking terrified because like
For sure.
it's dark. There's a fire lit, but it's dark because it's nighttime, and
Yeah.
this guy is like covered in black something glistening gross stuff, and so the whites of his eyes and the whites of his teeth must have just been like
Oh my
popping.
god, I
You
didn't
know,
even think of that.
just like
Yes.
creepy, scary. Who the fuck are you? So
Oh my god, that is sorry to interrupt, but have you seen what I'm imagining right now is have you seen there's like a prank trend on TikTok slash whatever, Instagram or whatever, where people will like put on like black like bodysuits and black like basically just black out their whole selves and then like startle their partner like in the middle
oh
of the
fuck
night, like
that.
they'll be like standing in the corner of a room and all of a sudden they like open their eyes and do this big smile and that's all you can see.
That's so mean.
Yeah, I don't know how real it is because I think you'd probably see the outline of them or something. I don't know, but it looks very creepy on
That's so
camera.
creepy.
I don't know what the trend is called, but I'm sure you could find it. I've seen it.
Emotionally
Yeah, it's
terrorize your
one.
partner.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those trends that only pops up when I'm scrolling TikTok at night, specifically. Like I always get the scariest TikToks when I'm after like 10 p.m. So, anyway, that's what I'm imagining is just like
Yes, so
the
it's like
eyes
that
and
kind of.
yeah.
So yeah, they're locking eyes, and Edward is just beaming at this guy, like
Oh
full
my
tooth
god.
smile. He's having the
Oof.
time of his life. And then, quietly, Edward just kind of slowly shut the door, leaving the porter alone in the room. Yeah. So it took the porter a second because he was like, wait, hold on. Like, you're not allowed to be here. And so he rushed after him. And on his way through the door, he stumbled over something, and it wound up being a bundle of things that Edward had stolen from the palace. Yikes. So in the
Oh.
bundle, there were 3 pairs of trousers, there were some foreign coins, a book, a sword, a padlock, and some undergarments that he had stolen from someone's drawer.
That's a wide array of memorabilia.
It sure is. Edward, though, nowhere to be seen because he's covered in black shit. So he's fading into the night. Like he's hard to catch. So this porter is like, oh my God, we have an intruder. He gets some of the staff and his colleagues together to help him search for this kid. And as they're in the process of trying to find him, they notice like a trail of soot leading around the palace.
Oh that's like precious. What the hell?
I know. And in the process of following this trail, they found a few more things. They found a busted up likeness of the queen. I don't know if it was like a bust of her head or if it was a portrait that had been like smashed or something. A likeness of the queen that had been damaged, along with 2 letters that had been opened, and they were pretty sure he had read them because his sooty little fingerprints were all over the paper. And the issue with this was that one of the letters was addressed to the queen and could only have been gotten from her private chambers.
Yikes. That's bold.
So Queen Victoria wasn't at the palace at the time. She was staying at Windsor Castle, which is, it's not that far away, but it's, she was in a different spot.
Different.
But still, it's like an escalating feeling of like, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, you know? At some point, the porter entered the marble hall, which is basically like this big reception and dinner room place to keep searching for this guy. And the marble hall has these like really pretty pillars in it. And as the porter was walking through it, he noticed motion behind one of the pillars. And he was like, oh, okay, gotta be him. So he sneaks up on Edward and tries to grab him. But because Edward is all slippery from the grease,
no,
he just wriggles his way out and keeps running through the palace. And then the most ridiculous foot chase ever ensued. There were staff running around. There were on-duty policemen running around all over the place to try and get this kid. And it's nighttime, so it's dark, and they're all barreling into each other and getting in each other's way.
This literally, it sounds like you're describing an episode of Scooby-Doo. You know how like they show like they're running through this layer of animation, then they show up here, and then they're running backwards, and then someone like they run again, but now they're wearing each other's clothes for some reason. Just like all this like ridiculous stuff. Yeah, that's what I'm imagining.
That's exactly how I picture it. Yes, it's so funny. So eventually, Edward manages to wiggle his way through a window, and he gets as far as the lawn before they are finally able to catch him. Like he almost gets away.
That's so far, yeah.
I know, right? So when they finally like apprehend this kid, he's filthy. He's covered in grease. He's covered in soot. He doesn't wash himself anyway. So he's just like a nasty, grubby little thing, which led the palace staff to believe that he got in through a chimney. That's also another place where the chimney sweep stuff comes in. That was later disproven because the chimneys in Buckingham Palace were like specifically built to not allow someone to enter that way. There was no way, even if it was a kid, you couldn't get in through a chimney. But in the process of searching him, because they had to make sure he didn't have like weapons on him and stuff, they found 3 pairs of women's underwear shoved down his trousers, and they would turn out to be the Queen's underwear.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
This it just does not sound like a real story. Like I know it is. I know
just
it
wait.
Is, but
oh my God.
What?
It's fucking insane.
I've never heard of this before.
That's what I was. Yeah. How have I never heard of this before?
Yeah, I'm blown away. I'm like, if this was the end of your story, that'd be enough. Like this feels
all right, see you guys.
All right, bye.
We've done enough.
Keep it cool, keep it creepy. Bye.
So it was morning by this point because when the porter initially saw him, it was like 5 a.m. So now it's like morning time. They bring him to the police station and they get him in front of basically a lower court that will tell them what needs to happen next. And the courtroom already was full of reporters and interested members of the public. Somehow the word had gotten out that a kid broke into Buckingham Palace, and it was just like oh, what? That's crazy. I can't believe a kid did that. I want to go see, Edward, when they bring him in, he is like super cheerful. He's enjoying the attention. And at this point, they didn't know who he was. They didn't know that he was Edward Jones or anything. So when they asked him for his name, he told them that he was called Edward Cotton and that he was the son of a tradesman. So they asked this kid, all right, well, how did you get here? He said he came from Hertfordshire a year ago and that he had met a man who asked to go with him to Buckingham Palace and that he went and that he had been in the palace ever since. By his own account, he had been in the palace for 11 months without anyone noticing. He said that during the day, he would hide behind furniture or up in a chimney, which is why he was so covered in soot, and that he would crawl out at night to steal food, wash his clothes, and just kind of walk around and do kid stuff. He also said, and this was a big, oh no, he said he was in the room while the Queen met with her ministers, like he was hiding, and he would eavesdrop on their conversations. We don't know if that's true or not, but holy shit, national security breach. Oh my God, awful. So the things that Edward was saying, immediately they were like, there are some lies going on here. We are suspicious of fuck about this. Because first of all, there's no way he could have been there for a year. He couldn't have been. The food was kept under lock and key. He couldn't have washed his clothes because the fires weren't lit all the time. More likely that it was just a few days. Secondly, he said he was from Hertfordshire, but he had a London accent. And anyone who knows about UK accents knows they are so fucking regional. You can drive 10 minutes down the road and get a completely new accent. It's like, this kid's lying.
You pointed that out to me when we visited you, and ever since, I never knew the difference before. I can tell there are different types of English accents, but I don't know where each one is from. Ever since you pointed out a London accent specifically to me, though, when we were in London, and ever since then, it's just so distinct.
It is.
Now that I notice it, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And there's different types of London accents too. It's not just all one. It's like, my favorite is East London, which Tom makes fun of me for. East London accents are so cool. They're so scary.
Why is it your favorite? Scary? Is that what you said?
Yeah, because it's the one where it's like, I'm going to have to edit this bit out, but it's very like, all right, love. Like that kind of shit.
Oh, yes. Okay, so that was, please don't edit that out because I love it. No disrespect. That's the one that I notice now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I love it so much. So yeah, they know that this kid is lying. In lieu of any real information about this kid, they put something in the paper that was basically like, hey, does anyone know who the fuck this kid is? Like, can you please let us know?
Oh, God. This is literally like a wanted poster, but opposite.
Yes. Yeah. Which made what was already kind of a growing story in the media even bigger. And it started a chain of events that would kind of turn him into a celebrity criminal. Or not a chain of events, but a pattern of reporting. So Edward's dad did wind up seeing the thing in the paper, and he came forward and he said that his son had been missing for a week since he threw him out. This story makes me want to smoke cigarettes. I'll tell you that for free. God.
That was such a fucking like old lady with a cigarette in her hand phrase. I'll tell you that for free. Let me tell you what, this so makes me want to smoke a cigarette. I'll tell you that for free.
I love when you do that voice. It's so funny. Okay, so this fucking kid. Once they confirmed Edward's real identity, they brought him back to court. And if the courtroom was busy the last time, this time it was packed. People were so interested in this. The news of some kid breaking into Buckingham Palace and running amok was massive. This time, Edward admitted that he did lie about being in the palace for 11 months, and he said that he only spent like a day or two in the palace, which still not great. Mm-hmm. They asked him about what he had with him, so like the sword, the underwear, the trousers, all that stuff. And he told them he had found them on the lawn.
Oh, yeah. That's usually
and the magistrate
where the queen keeps her shit.
Right. That's where I put my stuff, my dirty laundry, straight on the lawn. Mm-hmm.
Why not? More space.
So the magistrate was like, no, the fuck you didn't. You absolutely did not. And he sent him to a formal trial. Edward was brought to trial on the 28th of December, about like 2 weeks-ish after the break-in, and he was charged with theft. And the mood in the courtroom was fucking wild, dude. People were cracking jokes. There was laughter. The defense, like the lawyer that they hired, his name is Prendergast, he was just having a hoot. He was making fun of the whole thing because they all realized how ridiculous this situation was, right? Both that the kid had broke in, but also that like the palace security basically bungled this whole thing and just couldn't find a 14-year-old. You know, it was embarrassing for them, which made the public love it. Funnily enough, during the actual trial, the witnesses that they called to the stand, so like the porter, some other palace staff, that kind of thing, they very obviously avoided mentioning the queen's underwear like at all costs. And they instead called them articles of wearing apparel.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, we think that they had been ordered to not talk about the queen's underwear so as to not like embarrass her, but it's funny to watch them talk around it.
What was it again? Articles of wearing
apparel? Yes.
Oh, fancy.
Quite. So, like I mentioned, Edward did have a lawyer. His dad took out a loan of 5 guineas to hire him. His name was William Prendergast. Great last name. And Prendergast,
another cartoon character.
Right. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So Prendergast basically defended Edward by saying like, oh, he was just a curious, simple-minded little boy who just wanted to see the palace, and he only took a few little souvenirs to remember it by. Like, he basically painted the whole thing as a harmless prank. He did wind up calling Mr. Griffiths, the employer that we talked about earlier. He called him up to give a character testimony, basically. And Griffiths did say, like, Edward is a good kid. I did fire him, but I would be happy to hire him back, basically. So Prendergast told the court, basically, Edward is really sorry, and he super duper promises he will never break into the palace again.
Cool.
So the judge pretty much agreed that this was like relatively harmless, and Edward wound up being acquitted. Griffith was true to his word and did actually wind up reapprenticing Edward after the trial was over.
Interesting. Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about the public reaction to this trial, because this is one of those stories where the media is very much one of the kind of characters, I guess you could call it. They are an active participant in the way this plays out. So, like we talked about earlier, this was an absolutely huge story. It had been a rough year, like we already talked about, a lot of murders, riots, violence. So this was kind of a lighthearted alternative to what had been a ton of negativity, which means it caught on like wildfire. People were eating this shit up. It was so big that members of the public really wanted to meet Edward. He became kind of like a tourist attraction. So they started paying Edward's dad for the privilege of meeting his son.
What? I'm shocked and not surprised at all simultaneously. What? Okay.
Wait till I tell you who visited him.
Oh no.
So there's a couple notable people who visited Edward. Some we'll talk about now, some we'll talk about a little bit later on. Okay. One of the first was an American author named Fenimore Cooper of The Last of the Mohicans fame.
Oh, I was going to say, I recognize that name, but I don't know it.
Yeah.
Like I've never read. Yeah.
He was particularly interested in Edward because he was like, what an enterprising young lad. He would do great in America. So
I have no doubt that is exactly what was said and how it was said. 100%. Yeah.
So Cooper goes to meet Edward, but after meeting him, Cooper described Edward as, and I quote, a dull, undersized runt, remarkable only for his taciturnity and obstinacy.
Okay, wow.
The reason why he said this, I think, is because when Cooper offered Edward, basically like, I'll take you to America, Edward said that he would not go to America under any circumstances.
Okay.
So I think he was a little bit bitter. Yeah.
He was like butthurt. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he was butthurt about it.
That makes sense.
I mean, I do think Edward was kind of a shitty little kid, but not enough for a grown man to call him an undersized runt, you know?
Sorry. That should not be so funny. It's just... It is.
This whole story is so funny.
Because it's kind of redundant. Like, a runt is already undersized. So for someone to feel the need to emphasize this person's size.
I know. When he's funny. A child. Like, obviously, he's small.
Like, Gina's over here like, yeah, dude. Do you know about...
Yeah, man.
Undeveloped humans?
Last of the Mohicans. How about the last of your brain cells, huh? My fucking guy.
Oh! Got him.
So, so after Cooper and Edward met, Edward would later on receive another visit, this time from a theater manager, offering Edward a theatrical appearance. Basically, there was this play that they were putting on at a theater, and it was called Intrusion, or A Guest Uninvited. And it was a comedy that was based on Edward's break-in of Buckingham Palace. And the theater manager offered Edward £4 a week to basically come on stage at the end of the night and take a bow. That was it. Like, he just thought it would be great, like really funny to have the actual guy who broke in on the stage. God. And £4 back then, nothing to stake a stick at. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I will say, I thought you were going to say that he offered him money to do like a Phantom of the Opera situation. Like, will you hang out in the rafters for... I think that's a missed opportunity. I think that would be real funny.
That would be so funny.
What year is this again? That's a lot of money. This is back when people were making like a nickel a week.
I did do the math. I think I did it right.
Okay.
I'm so sorry if I did it wrong, you guys. But he would have been making £4 a week doing this, which is about £550 today, or like $700 a week.
Wow, that's
for a family that didn't really have anything.
Decent living. Yeah.
It's a decent chunk of change.
That's decent. Yeah.
So Edward was like totally up for it. But his dad was like, I'm a little bit worried you're going to become a laughing stock if you do that. So no. So he didn't wind up getting to do it. And remember when I said Griffith rehired Edward?
Yes.
His old apprentice guy? Yeah, he fired him within a year. Because, again, like he was not a great worker.
Just the same stuff all over again.
That was the same old shit.
I mean, can I ask? I should have asked this earlier. I didn't know if it was going to come up, but why did he offer to rehire him?
I think there is a chance that he was kind of coached by the defense to say that as a character witness. I also think that there was some, I don't quite want to call it like a sense of community because Griffiths was technically above them in the hierarchy, but he was looking after his own, basically, is what I think it was. I think he didn't want the full force of British law to come down on Edward.
That's kind of where my head was at, but it's one thing to say, oh, I'd hire him again on the spot, blah, 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 blah. It's another thing to actually do it. Like, that's very rare if someone gets fired and then their company's like, we'll vouch for you. That's not, I know. That's a notable thing. So, okay, but that does kind of paint a picture and match just the way you describe this
and the way that
period of time.
And Griffith seemed, from what I read, he seemed like just kind of a kind-hearted old guy. I think he just wanted to give Edward a chance, So anyway,
that's nice.
But he did fire him again. Yeah, right.
I would have been like, this guy? No, he's a weird city kid. No, I got rid of his ass weeks ago.
After he lost his job with Griffiths, he briefly apprenticed for a chemist as an errand boy, but then he got fired from that too. So
cool.
Yeah, like it's been about 2 years since he broke into Buckingham Palace, and same shit, different day. He can't hold down a job. So for the next few months, Edward just kind of like hung around and didn't do much. Like he would help his dad in the tailor's shop when he had to. Other than that, like he was just running around doing kid things. He would disappear for days at a time. But yeah, and he would be like up all night, sleep all day, that kind of thing. And I want
basically
to
living the dream.
Yeah, basically the exact life I want to lead. Yeah.
Just unemployed, doing whatever you want.
Oh, God.
Every kid's dream.
I would love that, but with tons of money. Retirement. That's what I'm talking about. Retirement.
Yeah.
So just to paint a picture of like what Edward's relationship was with his dad at this time, because his dad plays an important role in this. I want to read you a quote from a book called Queen Victoria and the Stalker because it's funny. And I think that they just describe it really well. So this is a little bit paraphrased, but poor Henry Jones was still very hard up, since the 5 guineas he had borrowed for Edward's defense was an immense sum for him. His main pleasure in life seemed to have been to drink beer, and if his arithmetic ability allowed him, it must have displeased him immensely that the defense of his ungrateful, grubby son had cost him the equivalent of 1,260 pints of good London ale. I know, dude.
That's the math they did.
Yeah.
First of all, I love a couple thoughts. One, the number of times the term grubby has been used to describe this child is very funny to me. I forgot that was a descriptor. Like I don't ever think of that word ever. So this is the most I've heard it in years. Hilarious. Secondly, the fact that is the most important thing, that they're like, look at what this poor man has lost due to this grubby little worm child, is pristine. That is that was a premier experience listening to you read that.
It's so fucking funny. It's so funny.
Wild.
Yeah, that book is, I need to put a link to it in the show notes because it's this guy named Jan Bondeson, and he's like alive. He's a lecturer at Cardiff University, which I went there.
Oh, cool.
So Ayo.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I think I read somewhere that he spent like 5 years working on this book. Like he was just so fascinated with this case. And the way that it's written is so fucking funny. Like it's funny because it's a funny story, but also Dr. Bondeson is just really good at writing it and contributing to the comedic value. And I love it. So highly recommend. So by this point, it had been almost, like I said, 2 years since Edward's first break-in. And during that time, Queen Victoria had gotten married. She married Prince Albert, and they had their first child, who was also named Victoria. Meanwhile, things were not going that well for our boy Edward. Home sucked, work sucked. So if Edward had made any progress towards letting go of his obsession with Queen Victoria, he definitely backtracked and fell back into obsession, because her marriage and the birth of the royal child, it was fucking everywhere. Like, you couldn't get away from it, you know? So, on the 3rd of December, 1840, at about 1:30 in the morning, the Queen's midwife was watching over the princess in the nursery when suddenly a door that led to the Queen's private dressing room slowly creaked open. And she couldn't see who was on the other side, so she just called out, like, who's there? And in response, the door slammed shut. So she was like, oh, fuck. Like, this is not good. So
Yikes,
she gets up. And, yeah, but to her credit, she acts very quickly. She gets up and she immediately bolts that door shut, like locks it. And she rings one of the bells that they used to have to call for help, basically. Like Downton Abbey style, ring a bell, servants come kind of thing.
Why wasn't she working security?
I know, right? Yeah, bring a woman in and it all gets solved. Anyway.
I was just going to say, I've got lots of thoughts, but it really was just that.
Yeah. So, to her assistance came a page and the Queen's old governess, and the three of them together went into the dressing room, because it was like, okay, we're not going to go alone, go together, and we can like overwhelm whoever this was. So they go into the dressing room, where they find, hiding under a sofa, the dirty, grinning face of Edward fucking Jones, who did not even try to run this time.
Why is he always grinning? That's so
He's just
creepy.
so happy to be there.
I'm truly imagining like a tourist, you know, when you're in a building, you're like, this is so great. This is so fun.
Wow. His little Polaroid camera. His Hawaiian shirt.
I'm imagining like a camera around the neck.
Yes.
What are those called? Yeah. On a lanyard or whatever.
Lanyard,
but it's not fancy enough to warrant that, you know?
Like one of the old ones they had that had the big, like...
Yeah. Yes.
I love that. So Edward was once again arrested by the police that were based at the palace and taken into custody. And apparently this time when they arrested him, he was like super polite. He didn't struggle at all. He was like just really nice. And he didn't have anything on him this time. He hadn't stolen anything. So at this point, we don't know how long Edward had been in the palace this time. So the cops were like, shit, we have two problems here. The first problem is, how are we supposed to tell the Queen that this kid snuck in again and was literally a door away from her while she was sleeping? Because the Queen was there that night. And the baby. Yeah.
Ugh.
So that's problem number one. Problem two is, what do we do with this fucking kid? He will not stop doing this. So they solved the first problem by basically, they like asked Prince Albert to tell her about it, because they were like, we don't want to tell her, you tell her. Yeah. Or like, I think they just told Albert about it, and Albert was like, yeah, okay, fine, I'll do it. And Queen Victoria did actually wind up writing about this in her diary. And I have a little snippet from Queen Victoria's diary.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I would too.
I would write about it too, yeah.
For sure. So, oh my God.
And this is, again, paraphrased a little bit, because it was a lot of stuff that, yeah. Anyway, paraphrasing. Albert told me that a man had been found under the sofa in my sitting room. We have since heard that he was in the palace once before, was half-witted, and had merely come out of curiosity. But supposing he had come into the bedroom, how frightened I should have been.
Okay, so many things. You keep hitting me with stuff I have so much to say about. One, definitely think you should be the narrator on Bridgerton. Like,
thank you.
No disrespect to my girl, Julie, but that was perfect. That was beautiful. You did a great job with that.
Thanks.
Secondly, what the fuck? This is a wild story.
It's wild. It's so wild.
This half-witted boy, there was a man underneath my, sofa? He was under a sofa? Wild.
How frightened I should have been. Oh, heavens.
Yeah. That's the funniest part to me. Like, oh my.
No disrespect to Queen Vic. Like, excellent woman. But, or to my knowledge anyway. But also LOL.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Okay, so the second problem of what to do with Edward was not so easily solved. Because at this point, this kid had done this twice within a 2-year period. So they could not afford to fuck around here. But they were also really worried about information getting out that, like, they didn't want to get out, basically. They didn't know, the biggest thing was that they didn't know how long Edward had been in the dressing room. So they were like, shit, did he like see the queen naked? Like, what if like the queen and Prince Albert were getting it on and Edward was like there and saw it and hiding and they didn't, you know what I mean? It was like a scandal waiting to happen.
Ugh.
Yes. So the very next day, Edward was taken by the police to the Home Department in Whitehall, where he was interrogated by the Privy Council, which is the monarch's formal body of advisors. This was some serious shit. So the Privy Council, just for a bit of like historical information, it is, in a judicial sense, kind of a very archaic judicial body. So they had been used since the Middle Ages to basically deal with really high priority complex issues. They were not an everyday kind of thing. Like, they would be brought in if a baron was committing treason or something like that, not a 14-year-old breaking into a palace. They were pulling out the big guns. Also worth noting that when you are placed before the Privy Council, you do not have the right to legal representation. So Edward didn't have a lawyer this time. He was on his own.
Wow, that's big.
It is big. So he told them exactly how he had broken in, which was through a window, and that he had been in the palace for 3 days, and at one point had actually sat on the throne itself. And they did confirm this. They went to go see the throne room, and it had like soot, like his, again, grubby little fingerprints all over it. Mm-hmm.
His grubby little booty was on the throne.
Yes. Yeah. Big deal. Ooh. So they asked, like, to try and figure out the whole "did you see the queen naked" thing. They were like, "Oh, did you like see the queen while you were there, or like anything? What about like the princess? Did you see the princess?" And he said, no, he hadn't seen like the queen at all, but he did think he had heard the princess cry at one point. Which at first that seems like, oh, okay, he heard a baby cry. But I think the reason why it freaked them out is that he was close enough to the baby to hear it cry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that would freak me out. Yeah. No,
yeah,
that's
like, they make kind of a big stink about it. Yeah. Which rightfully so.
Yeah. That feels dangerous. Because it's not just, they're not in your average person's house. You can hear a baby cry down the block. In a palace, that's close.
Yeah. So, like, I'm not saying what Edward did was okay, but it was certainly funny.
For sure. You know? Yep. There's a lot of those. Lots of gray areas.
Yeah. So he also said that the reason why he had broken in this time was because he wanted to write a book about the queen, and he wanted to get to know how they lived in the palace.
Okay.
In particular, he said he wanted to write, and I'm quoting here, "an account of the palace and of the disposition and arrangement of the chambers, and particularly the dressing room of Her Majesty." That's basically like a 16-year-old boy being like, yeah, I broke into the girls' locker room for research. You know, like,
that's literally what that is.
It's so ridiculous. So Edward's dad was brought in, and they were basically like, dude, what the hell, man? Control your kid. What is wrong with him? And Edward's dad completely threw him under the bus and was like, yeah, my kid's insane. I don't know what to tell you. He's crazy. He's a madman. Now, worth noting.
This is 2 years
He's 16.
Later? He's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he's 16. So worth noting, there's no proof that Edward was actually like mentally ill or quote unquote insane. The general consensus just seems to be that he was odd. Like, his diagnosis was just being fucking weird. They actually wound up having 2 police doctors inspect Edward to investigate these claims of insanity. And they said that although his head was of a most peculiar formation, they could not confirm that he was actually insane. So basically, you're ugly, but you're not crazy. So
what the hell?
Yeah. So since Edward hadn't actually stolen anything and he was unarmed when they found him, they basically gave him like a petty offense. And sentenced him to 3 months of hard labor, which I want to talk about for a second, because the kind of hard labor they had him doing sounds brutal.
Oh, God.
This part's not so funny. It's just, I was like, holy shit, I can't believe that was an actual punishment back then. So back when this was happening in the Victorian era, there was a big interest in having prisoners do like pointless tasks as a form of punishment. I didn't know about this. Maybe you've heard of it before. One example was they would put you on the crank machine, which is when you would literally crank something and it would scoop up sand and then dump it back out. And there was no point to doing it. You just had to stand there doing it for like 6 hours. Another thing that they had to do was something called the penal treadmill. Yeah, your facial expression is how I feel too.
What the fuck is that?
It's basically a giant stairmaster, is like the most modern way I can explain it. Yeah. And you would have to be on these. And that's what they had Edward doing. He was on the treadmill when he did his 3 months of hard labor. And the way that it worked, based on what I read, is that you have to be on these things for 6 hours at a time. And you would go like on the treadmill for 15 minutes, and then you would get a 5-minute break. And then 15 minutes, and then 5-minute break. And over for 6 hours in total silence. You were not allowed to speak. And even on some of the machines, they would put partitions in between the prisoners so you couldn't even look at each other.
So this is basically like what people, they're basically doing interval training, but just all day long.
Yes, and like not feeding them very much at all.
Yeah. So this is what people do by choice for like 30 minutes to an hour a day, but just all day.
Yeah. So eventually, like, they kind of moved away from the whole pointless labor thing, and they were like, we might as well use it for something. So eventually in some prisons, they would kind of link up the treadmills to power like a corn mill or a water pump or something. I'm not sure if Edward's prison had one where the treadmill was actually useful or not, but regardless, this kid spent 3 months walking upstairs relentlessly and being fed very little food. So while all this is happening, I want to once again talk about the public reaction to this, because this is the second break-in. And despite efforts to minimize this story as much as they could, the media could just not let it slip by at all. And the fact that Edward had been taken before the Privy Council, like to the Home Office, made it even more sensational. The palace was eventually, they kind of had to release a statement because it was a little bit too late to cover up the entire thing. So they put out a statement with like the bare minimum of facts, basically just confirming that the thing had happened and that was it. There was no extra detail. But the media smelled a scandal and they just would not leave it alone. They somehow found out that he had sat on the throne. They found out that he heard the princess cry, all of that. And they published everything. So once again, Edward, who by this point was known as the Boy Jones, took the spotlight.
Okay.
And that's where the Boy Jones comes from. So like I said, the media published anything they could find on this kid. And when they couldn't find something, they would speculate about him. The Times at the time described... The Times at the time. Sorry.
I thought you misspoke for a second, but I read like the paper, the Times at the time. Yeah.
The paper, the Times, described it like this. And this was released like around the time this was happening. The subject engrosses public attention at the west end of town. Nothing else is talked of. This was the biggest fucking story. Like, I cannot stress enough how huge this was. But not all of the coverage was like positive stuff. There was a lot of genuine concern about palace security because, like, what the hell? Why could a kid break in twice? That's unbelievable. And then there was also this sense of like, he was only given 3 months? Like, what? You know, kind of a injustice feeling. Despite all of this, Edward began his prison sentence as a rogue and a vagabond, is what he was officially labeled. But Edward's most recent visit to Buckingham Palace would not be his last, and the fallout of these nocturnal visits is quite literally the most wild thing I have ever fucking heard. And that is all for part 1. That's where I'm going to leave it.
Dun, dun, dun.
We're going to have to break this into a part 2. Yep, it has to be 2 parts because there's no way I can get through all of it. I don't even know what time it is.
Yeah. Okay. All right, friends, you heard it here straight from Gina's beautiful mouth. We are breaking this up into a 2-parter. I'm not gonna lie, I did forget we talked about this. I was like, what happened? Tell me. I have no idea what time it is. I have no idea how long we've been talking. So cool. stay tuned because we're not going to make you wait until next week. Tune back in Thursday morning. We will have the rest of this story for you. And yeah, we'll join you back here with our Phish food. Please grab a dish of ice cream if you want. If you're not like on the way to work. Well, yeah, no, you can eat ice cream on the way to work. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Or on the way home. Let's wait and rate our ice cream at the end of Thursday's episode because this is a two-parter.
Okay, sweet.
So join us for episode 6.5 in a couple days. And until then, little spoons. Keep it cool.
Keep it creepy.
I'm lost. Excellent.